Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, so if someone handed you a freshly printed manual today and they guaranteed it was a flawless blueprint for, dismantling toxic leadership in your company,
right,
or like identifying fake friends before they ruin your life, or even curing that psychological paralysis that keeps you from starting a new project.
Oh, yeah, the imposter syndrome manual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You would probably assume it was written by the latest Silicon Valley billionaire or maybe some elite venture capitalist.
Sure.
But the crazy truth is, this manual was actually compiled by a group of ancient scribes working for a Middle Eastern king, like thousands of years ago.
It's the ultimate paradox of human knowledge, really.
How so?
Well, we tend to think our modern problems are entirely unprecedented, like algorithmic rage bait, the isolation of executive leadership, burnout.
Yeah, because we have smartphones, we think our psychological landscape is fundamentally changed.
Exactly. But the compilation we're exploring today proves that the human operating system, it really hasn't received a significant hardware update in about 3,000 years.
Which is wild. And that makes our mission for this deep dive incredibly relevant. We're embarking on an exclusive, really highly detailed exploration of the book of Proverbs.
Specifically, chapters 25 through 31, right?
Right. We're here to act as your guides, helping you extract practical wisdom, moral insight, and direct life application from these ancient texts.
But before we get into the actual mechanisms of this wisdom, we need to set the stage a bit.
Yeah, because we aren't just reading a dusty scroll here.
No, not at all. We're looking at a very specific historical rescue mission. Chapter 25 opens by telling us that these are the Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of King Hezekiah of Judah copied out.
And that phrase, copied out, that carries a ton of historical weight, doesn't it?
A massive amount. Hezekiah reigned over Judah a couple of hundred years after Solomon. And this was a time of immense geopolitical instability.
The Assyrian Empire was expanding, right?
Exactly. They were threatening to just swallow smaller nations whole. So in the face of this potential cultural annihilation, Hezekiah commissioned his scholars to essentially back up the intellectual and spiritual hard drive of his nation.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah, it implies this massive transfer of knowledge from oral traditions or maybe scattered, deteriorating royal archives into a formalized, curated, written collection.
So they weren't just preserving, like, quaint little sayings.
No, they were preserving the architectural blueprints of a wise society. Mm-hmm. They focused heavily on governance, justice, and the gritty economic realities of daily survival.
So if you are listening to this right now, whether you're, a mid-level manager trying to navigate a corporate restructuring, or someone trying to figure out why your personal relationships feel so exhausting.
Or just a person looking at your bank account and wondering how to build sustainable wealth.
Yes. You are the intended audience for this architectural blueprint.
And the first floor of this societal architecture, like the absolute foundation of how humans organize themselves, it deals with the sheer weight of leadership and the pursuit of truth.
It really does. And the text wastes absolutely no time drawing a stunning contrast between the divine domain and the human domain.
Right. Proverbs 25, verses 2 and 3 establishes this immediately.
It says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the glory of kings is to search out a matter."
And it goes on to say, "As the heavens for height and the earth for depth, so the hearts of kings are unsearchable."
So we're presented with the inscrutability of the universe.
Yes. God, or divine providence, dwells in unsearchable depths. The mechanics of the cosmos are largely concealed from us.
But human leadership operates on the exact opposite mandate.
Exactly. A human leader's honor is not to sit in mysterious silence, but to actively, rigorously investigate.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because if I'm a modern executive, or a school principal, or even just a parent managing a chaotic household, this sounds exhausting.
Well, yeah, it is.
Isn't it just infinitely more efficient to delegate? Like, think about how organizations are structured today. A CEO is constantly drowning in data.
Right. The standard operating procedure is to demand the executive summary.
Exactly. They tell their team, just give me the 3 bullet points, tell me what the data suggests we should do, and I'll just sign off.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't diving into the weeds and searching out a matter run completely counter to modern efficiency? You just can't micromanage everything.
Well, I think you're confusing micromanagement with intellectual curiosity. And, moral accountability.
Okay, unpack that.
Yes, it runs counter to modern efficiency, but the text is arguing that this rigorous investigation is the absolute prerequisite for modern effectiveness and justice.
Because the executive summary is flawed.
The danger of the executive summary is that the higher you go in any organization, the more sanitized the information becomes.
Oh, that is so true.
People filter the data to protect their own jobs, right? Or to hide their mistakes, or to push their own agendas.
So if a leader merely accepts the surface narrative,
If they just glance at the bullet points and sign off, they aren't actually leading. They are just rubber stamping the biases of their subordinates.
wow, they basically become a hostage to the people feeding them the information.
Precisely. Matthew Henry, the classical commentator, he points out that it is the profound honor of anyone in authority to use a close application of mind.
A close application of mind. I like that.
Yeah, they must take pains in examining situations, deliberately choosing not to give judgment hastily. Searching out a matter means penetrating the organizational friction.
So it means walking the factory floor.
Yes. Or auditing the actual code, or sitting down with the frontline customer service reps instead of just reading the quarterly report.
Because if you don't do that, you leave yourself completely vulnerable to manipulation.
Exactly. Which perfectly sets up the mechanical metaphor that follows right after in Proverbs 25.4 and 5.
Right? The text says, take away the dross from the silver, and material comes out for the refiner. Take away the wicked from the king's presence, and his throne will be established in righteousness.
Let's actually look at the physics of this because it's fascinating.
Yeah, how did ancient silver refining actually work, and why does it map so perfectly onto organizational leadership?
Well, ancient metallurgy was this incredibly precise and violent process. When you mine silver ore, it isn't pure.
It's mixed with a bunch of other stuff.
Right. It's heavily alloyed with lead, copper, zinc, and other impurities, which is the dross.
Okay.
To separate it, the refiner has to place the raw ore into a crucible and subject it to immense sustained heat, often exceeding 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit.
That is intense.
It is. And as the metal liquefies, the impurities oxidize. They physically separate from the silver and float to the surface as this...
A scummy crust on top.
Exactly. And the refiner then carefully skims this dross off the top.
And if they fail to do that, like what happens if they just let the metal cool with all those impurities still inside?
The resulting metal is completely brittle.
Really?
Yeah, it might look shiny on the outside for a brief moment, but the moment it is struck by a hammer to be shaped into a coin or a vessel, it just shatters. The structural integrity is entirely compromised.
Wow. That is a devastatingly accurate picture of a toxic corporate culture.
Isn't it?
Think about what it means to take away the wicked from the king's presence. A leader has to turn up the heat in their organization.
You apply the heat of high standards, rigorous auditing, strict accountability.
And when you do that, the dross, like the bad actors, the sycophants, the embezzlers, the people creating a hostile work environment, they naturally rise to the surface.
Because they can't survive in a high accountability environment.
Exactly. And then the leader has to do the painful work of skimming them off, firing people, reassigning them, removing their access to power.
And if the leader lacks the courage to turn up the heat and remove those toxic elements, the entire organization becomes brittle.
So the moment a market crash hits,
or a PR crisis occurs, the moment the hammer strikes, the company shatters because its core is compromised by corrupt or incompetent actors.
establishing a throne in righteousness isn't just about the leader being a nice person then.
No, it's about the active, sometimes very painful purification of their inner circle.
Because if you allow the dross to remain, you eventually devolve into the kind of leadership warned about in Proverbs 28 and 29.
Right. Proverbs 28.15 gives us this visceral image. As a roaring lion or a charging bear, so is a wicked ruler over helpless people.
The evolutionary psychology of that imagery is just fascinating.
It really is. A roaring lion freezes its prey with sound.
And a charging bear is an unstoppable force of sheer mass and aggression.
So this is leadership through pure, unadulterated terror.
The leader doesn't view their power as a tool to protect the vulnerable.
No, they view their power as a mechanism to devour. They extract value from their employees to feed their own ego or, their own bonus structure.
And we see this constantly today. If you were listening to this on your commute to a job where your boss manages by screaming, by withholding information, or by threatening your job security over minor infractions.
You are living under the roaring lion right now.
And Proverbs accurately predicts exactly how human beings respond to that kind of environment. Proverbs 28.1 says that when the wicked rise to power, men hide themselves.
That is the biological fight-or-flight response manifesting in a corporate setting.
When fear is the primary management tool, employees just adopt a culture of survival.
Exactly. What does it mean that men hide themselves? It means they stop volunteering for new projects because standing out makes you a target.
They hide their mistakes instead of reporting them.
Which leads to catastrophic systemic failures down the line. They hoard information. Innovation completely dies.
Because innovation requires the psychological safety to fail, and you absolutely cannot fail around a raging bear.
You can't. Contrast that with Proverbs 29.2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice.
Or, in modern terms, they thrive. They feel secure enough to build, to create, and to speak the truth.
Now, most of us listening are not absolute monarchs. We don't have the power to plunge a nation into war.
But this isn't just for presidents and CEOs.
No, it scales down perfectly to whatever sphere of sovereignty you possess.
Exactly. So here's the question you need to bring into your own reality right now. Where do you hold power over others?
Are you a shift supervisor at a retail store?
Are you a senior engineer mentoring juniors? Or maybe you're the head of a family.
In that specific space, are you acting as a raging bear demanding that everyone serve your emotional needs?
Or are you acting as a righteous guide, doing the hard, tedious work to search out a matter and skim the dross from your own life?
That requires immense self-awareness. And it actually brings us to a crucial pivot in the text.
Right.
A leader cannot possibly search out the truth, and they certainly cannot accurately gauge if they are acting like a roaring lion, if they are completely isolated.
The architecture of a wise society relies on the macro level of leadership, but it is built entirely out of the micro level of interpersonal relationships.
Yes. If your inner circle is full of yes men, you're already compromised.
Which is why chapters 25 through 27 spend so much time dissecting the mechanics of friendship, conflict, and the literal physical weight of our words.
The text makes it incredibly clear that words are not just ephemeral sounds, they are structural materials.
They can build and they can demolish.
Let's start with the craftsmanship of communication. Proverbs 25.11 paints this masterpiece of an image.
A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver.
What are we actually looking at here?
We're looking at bespoke, high-end, ancient artistry. Commentators like Albert Barnes have done deep dives into the historical and archaeological context of this visual.
Oh, really? What did they find?
He suggests it likely refers to actual, physical golden fruit, perhaps solid gold or heavily gilded apples, set inside intricately chased, open-worked silver baskets.
Like a royal gift.
Exactly. These were the kind of breathtaking, costly royal gifts that Tyrian artists would craft for a monarch like Solomon.
So the open lattice of the silver network allowed the gleaming gold fruit to be seen shining through it. It's a study in perfect contrast and perfect placement.
So it isn't just about saying something true. It's about the setting of the truth.
Precisely. A word fitly spoken literally translates to a word spoken on its wheels or in its exact right season.
It's about emotional intelligence.
Yes. You can have the gold apple of a perfectly true piece of advice, but if you deliver it in a rusty tin can of anger or at the wrong time...
Like criticizing your spouse the second they walk through the door after a terrible day.
Exactly. The value is completely lost. The wisdom is in the delivery.
The silver setting is the timing, the tone of voice, the empathy.
Or choosing a private setting rather than a public dressing down.
But, Proverbs is also relentlessly realistic. Not all necessary words are beautiful or easy to hear, no matter how nice the silver basket is.
Very true. Proverbs 27 verses 5 and 6 hits us with one of the most countercultural concepts in the entire book.
Better is open rebuke than hidden love. The wounds of a friend are faithful, although the kisses of an enemy are profuse.
This is where ancient wisdom directly collides with our modern neurochemistry.
Let's explore that collision, because our entire modern social structure is built to optimize the exact opposite of this verse.
Oh, absolutely. We are biologically and algorithmically addicted to flattery.
We post a picture or a thought, and we just want the dopamine hit of 100 likes. We want validation.
And when someone criticizes us, even mildly, our brain perceives it as a threat.
Right, so we block them, we unfollow them, we retreat to our echo chambers, we literally run toward the kisses and run away from the wounds.
That's the tragedy of our social wiring. When we hear a rebuke, our amygdala, the fear center of the brain, it often hijacks our prefrontal cortex.
We process social rejection or criticism using the exact same neural pathways that process physical pain.
That is why it literally hurts to be told we are wrong.
But Proverbs understand that this pain is sometimes medically necessary.
Matthew Henry uses the analogy of physician here. A true friend must act like a surgeon.
And the surgeon's ultimate care is to cure the disease, not to please the palate of the patient.
If you have a tumor of arrogance, or a destructive addiction, or a habit of self-sabotage, a true friend takes out the scalpel.
They cut you, they inflict a faithful wound.
Wait, I have to stop you there, because I can hear listeners throwing their hands up right now.
Fair enough.
If I am constantly taking hits from a so-called true friend, at what point does it cross the line into emotional abuse?
Right. That's the big question.
How do I measure a faithful wound against just plain bullying or toxic negativity? People use, I'm just being brutally honest, as a shield to be incredibly cruel.
That is the essential diagnostic question. How do we differentiate the surgeon's scalpel from the mugger's knife?
Exactly.
It comes down to the established architecture of the relationship and the ultimate motive. Okay, so a faithful wound comes from a friend who has a long track record of hidden love that has been demonstrated through quiet, supportive actions.
Yes. They have earned the relational equity to make a withdrawal. Furthermore, a surgeon cuts you open only to remove the poison and sew you back up toward healing.
Their goal is your restoration.
Right. A toxic person, a bully, or an enemy uses brutal honesty to keep you small, to vent their own insecurities, or to maintain power over you.
They leave the wound open.
Precisely. And on the flip side, the text says, the kisses of an enemy are profuse.
Flattery is an anesthetic.
The enemy flatters you to keep you numb while you walk right off a cliff. They tell you your terrible business idea is genius because they want to see you fail.
They tell you your toxic behavior is justified because they want to keep you isolated.
Which is why the text emphasizes the necessity of friction. Proverbs 27.17 says, iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens his friend's countenance.
We see this verse slapped on men's retreat t-shirts all the time, usually alongside some imagery of medieval swords.
Yeah, but let's break down the physical mechanics of this. How does iron actually sharpen iron?
It requires violence.
Yes. When you use an iron file on an iron blade, you are literally grinding away material. Metal is scraping against metal.
It produces intense heat. It produces sparks.
It is a highly abrasive, destructive process at the micro level. But it is the absolute only way a tool regains its cutting edge.
Because without that abrasion, the blade just gets duller and duller with every use.
If we translate this into human relationships, it means healthy friendships require the friction of debate, of pushback, of mutual accountability.
If you connect this to the broader picture of human intellectual history, this is the exact foundation of the Socratic method in ancient Greece.
Socrates believed that rigorous, sometimes deeply uncomfortable dialogue where your core assumptions are aggressively challenged and torn down was the only path to arriving at true understanding.
So if your friendships have no friction,
if you only surround yourself with people who mirror your opinions back to you and never challenge your blind spots, you are surrounding yourself with dull iron.
you will eventually lose your ability to cut through the complexities of life.
So friction is necessary for growth. But Proverbs makes a massive distinction between the constructive friction of iron sharpening iron and the destructive explosion of gossip and meddling.
This is where the wisdom becomes startlingly relevant to our digital age. Chapter 26 addresses the talebearer and the troll.
Let's look at verse 17 first. He that passeth by, and meddleth with strife belonging not to him, is like one that taketh a dog by the ears.
It is a brilliantly comic and terrifying image.
Imagine walking down the street and seeing a feral dog.
And for some inexplicable reason, you reach down and grab it by the ears. What is your next move?
You can't safely hold on because it is violently thrashing and trying to bite you.
And you certainly can't let go, because the moment you do, it will attack you.
You have trapped yourself in a nightmare of your own making simply by touching something that wasn't your business.
That is the perfect analogy for jumping into other people's internet drama.
Ooh.
Or taking sides in an office dispute that doesn't involve your department.
You think you're dispensing justice, but you are just grabbing a feral dog. You're going to get bitten.
But it gets darker. Proverbs 26.18 and 19 describes a uniquely modern pathology. Quote, "As a madman who casteth firebrands, arrows, and death, so is the man that deceiveth his neighbor and saith, Am not I in sport?"
Am I not in sport? Or, to use the modern translation, I'm just joking. Why are you taking it so seriously?
This describes a person who uses humor or irony as a weapon of mass destruction.
Let's really analyze this, because this isn't just about an annoying prankster.
No, this perfectly maps onto the algorithmic rage bait that powers social media today.
We have entire platforms mathematically incentivized to reward the throwing of firebrands.
Outrage generates engagement, and engagement generates ad revenue.
So you have bad actors, trolls, hyper-partisan influencers, malicious gossips who casually love arrows that destroy reputations, ruin careers, or incite actual real-world violence.
When they're called out on the damage they've caused, what is their defense?
It was just a meme. It's just a joke. I'm just asking questions.
The ancient text strips away that defense and calls it exactly what it is: the behavior of a madman. It refuses to accept irony as an excuse for malice.
Words have physical weight. A false report raised in mirth can easily be spread in malice. The firebrand doesn't care if you threw it as a joke. It will still burn the house to the ground.
So as you evaluate the architecture of your own life, look at the people you interact with daily. Look at the content you consume and share.
Are you inviting the constructive friction of iron sharpening iron? Or are you addicted to the dopamine of deceitful kisses?
Who in your life loves you enough to hold the scalpel and deliver a faithful wound?
And perhaps, more uncomfortably, are you secretly playing the madman? Are you throwing firebrands in your group chats or on your timelines, pretending it's just a game while you slowly incinerate the trust of your community?
That is a diagnostic scan of the highest order, and it naturally shifts our focus.
We've looked at the macro level of leadership and the interpersonal level of relationships.
But the architecture of a wise society relies on individuals who can actually execute their duties. Which brings us to the internal landscape, specifically the battle between diligence and sloth.
Primarily covered in chapters 26 through 28.
The core insight here is a masterpiece of psychology. Laziness is very rarely just physical lethargy. It is almost always masked by manufactured fear.
The character of the sluggard in Proverbs is the ultimate tragicomedy.
We see it in chapter 26, verses 13 through 16. The text says, "The slothful man saith, there is a lion in the way. A lion is in the streets."
It goes on to describe him turning on his bed like a door on its hinges.
And it concludes by saying the sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason. Let's dissect the lion in the streets, because this is profound.
The sluggard is terrified of the street. Why? Because the street is the domain of reality.
It's where the marketplace is, where the fields are, where you're judged by your output and your competence.
The street requires effort and exposes you to the possibility of failure. So how does the sluggard's brain protect him from the pain of potential failure?
It invents a phantom. It hallucinates a lion.
Because if there is a literal lion outside, staying in bed isn't lazy.
Right. Staying in bed is a tactical survival choice.
Exactly. Lions do not roam the city streets during the workday. It is a completely irrational, manufactured excuse.
Yet the sluggard's defense mechanism is so powerful that he genuinely convinces himself that his inaction is a form of highly evolved prudence.
That is why he is wiser in his own conceit than 7 rational people.
His friends tell him, "There is no lion, get up and go to work." But he looks at them with pity, believing they are reckless fools, while he alone possesses the wisdom of caution.
Let's bring this right into the modern workplace and our internal monologues. We don't worry about literal apex predators outside our apartments.
But our amygdala still functions exactly the same way. What are the lions we manufacture today?
We call it analysis paralysis or imposter syndrome.
We tell ourselves, if I launch this freelance business, the market will crash, I'll be sued, and I'll end up homeless.
Or if I apply for that management role, my coworkers will instantly resent me, I'll be exposed as a fraud, and my life will be a living hell.
We invent these catastrophic lions of public humiliation and total ruin so we can justify staying in the warm, comfortable bed of the status quo.
And while we stay in that bed, we tell ourselves we are just doing more research.
That is the genius of the next metaphor. The door turning on its hinges.
A door can swing back and forth all day long. It's in constant motion. It experiences friction, but it never actually leaves the door frame.
It never travels anywhere.
We do this all the time. We read 50 self-help books. We download 10 different productivity apps.
Why listen to podcasts about entrepreneurship?
We are constantly moving, turning on our hinges, but we never take the actual risk of stepping into the street. We confuse preparation with execution.
So what is the antidote to this self-deception?
Proverbs 27, verses 23 through 27 offers the cure. Grounded diligence.
It commands, "Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks, and look well to thy herds. For riches are not forever, and doth the crown endure to every generation."
Let's explore the mechanics of this agrarian metaphor. What did it mean for an ancient shepherd to know the state of their flocks?
It meant intimate physical inspection.
A shepherd couldn't manage a flock from a distance. They had to walk among the sheep, feeling their wool, checking for parasites.
Noting which ewes were pregnant, which lambs were limping.
It is the embrace of unglamorous, tedious reality. The text warns that riches make themselves wings and fly away. Wealth is inherently entropic.
If you do not actively maintain your assets, the natural laws of the universe will erode them.
Okay, but I need to interject here.
Go ahead.
Because modern listeners are highly sensitive to this language right now. When people hear, be diligent, manage your assets, work constantly to prevent entropy,
They immediately associate this with toxic hustle culture.
yes, the Sigma grind set. The idea that you must work 80 hours a week, monetize every hobby, optimize your sleep schedule, and sacrifice your health on the altar of productivity.
Doesn't this text just validate the worst excesses of modern capitalism?
That is a very fair critique, and it requires us to apply wisdom with deep discernment.
We have to separate the text's endorsement of wealth creation from the modern obsession with wealth hoarding.
Right. Proverbs is fundamentally pro-industry and recognizes the moral good of capital allocation. Diligence creates stability for the community.
However, it explicitly rejects the frantic, endless hustle.
If you look closely at the language in chapter 27, it anchors this diligence in the rhythm of nature. The hay appeareth, and the tender grass showeth itself, and herbs of the mountains are gathered.
Let's talk about the agricultural calendar.
Yes, there is a season to shear the sheep. There is a season to aggressively gather the hay.
But there's also a season winter when the fields lie fallow and the shepherd rests.
Hustle culture demands a perpetual summer, a constant state of maximum yield.
Biologically and agriculturally, if you demand a perpetual summer from a field, you destroy the topsoil. You create a dust bowl.
Burnout is the human equivalent of topsoil depletion. The diligence Proverbs demands is rhythmic stewardship. It is paying attention to the specific season you are in.
It is the difference between panic striving and grounded responsibility.
So, listener, evaluate your own internal landscape. First, what is the lion you are currently pretending is in your street?
What the catastrophic failure are you hallucinating to avoid taking the next necessary step in your life?
Second, what is the flock you need to be paying closer attention to today? Stop looking at the abstract data. Go inspect the actual sheep.
Maybe your flock is your team at work. Maybe it's your actual bank account that you've been afraid to look at, or maybe it is your child's emotional state.
Go know the state of your flock.
To admit that we have hallucinated lions or that we have neglected our flocks requires a profound shift in our ego.
It requires humility.
And this realization transitions us from the practical mechanics of daily life into the deep epistemological foundations of wisdom itself.
This is where chapter 30 breaks the mold. We shift away from the Proverbs of Solomon, and we are introduced to a man named Agur.
Chapter 30 is titled The Words of Agur, the son of Jacob.
Who exactly is this guy, and why does he get an entire chapter in a book dominated by Solomon's royal wisdom?
Historically, Agur is an enigma. The names Agur, Jacob, Ithiel, and Ukal, who are mentioned as his students, don't appear elsewhere in the historical records of Israel in any prominent way.
Some scholars believe he was a sage from a neighboring nation whose wisdom was so universally profound that the Hebrew compilers integrated it into their sacred text.
What is vital is his approach. Agur's core insight is that true wisdom actually begins with the total dismantling of human arrogance.
He starts his masterclass with a confession that is jarring.
Proverbs 30, verses 2 and 3. Surely I am the most ignorant of men, and have not the understanding of a man. I neither learned wisdom nor have the knowledge of the holy.
This is the sage, the master teacher, stepping up to the podium and telling his students, I know absolutely nothing.
This is the epistemological baseline of all true science and philosophy. It echoes Socrates' famous realization. I know that I know nothing.
Agur looks out at the universe. He asks in verse 4, Who hath gathered the wind in his fists? Who hath bound the waters in a garment? Who hath established all the ends of the earth?
He realizes the sheer, terrifying scale of the cosmos.
He looks at the mechanics of the weather, the oceans, the geology of the earth, and he realizes that human reason, while powerful, is ultimately finite. It humbles him to the dust.
It is the exact opposite of the sluggard we just analyzed.
The sluggard was a fool, yet was wise in his own conceit. Agur is a recognized genius, yet claims utter ignorance.
Out of this profound humility comes what commentators often call the golden prayer, verses 7 through 9.
He says to God, "Two things have I required of thee. Deny me them not before I die. Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me."
You give me neither poverty nor riches.
It is one of the most psychologically astute requests in all of ancient literature.
But let's pause and really challenge this. Because if we are honest, almost nobody listening to this deep dive would ever genuinely pray that prayer.
Our entire society is structured around the accumulation of capital. We play the lottery, we negotiate for stock options, we dream of early retirement on a beach.
Wealth solves problems. Why on earth would a brilliant sage actively pray against being wealthy?
Because Agur understands that humans are incredibly fragile and highly susceptible to their environments. He diagnoses the lethal side effects of the extremes.
Let's look at the pathology of wealth first.
He says in verse 9, "Lest I be full and deny thee and say, 'Who is the Lord?'" Agur fears the illusion of self-sufficiency.
When you have immense wealth, your money acts as a buffer between you and reality.
If you get sick, you hire the best private doctors. If you make a mistake, you pay lawyers to make it go away.
You no longer need to rely on your community, and you certainly don't feel a daily reliance on the divine.
Wealth breeds an arrogance that whispers, "I am the master of my own universe." Agur knows his own soul well enough to know he would succumb to that arrogance.
The buffer of wealth turns into a prison of isolation. But he also prays against poverty.
He says, "Lest I be poor and steal and take the name of my God in vain."
Exactly. He doesn't romanticize poverty. There's no nobility in starvation.
Extreme poverty brings desperate, grinding temptations. It creates a survival scenario where a person might be forced to compromise their deepest, most closely held moral framework just to feed their children.
Agur fears the moral compromise that desperation breeds.
So he prays for food convenient for me, which literally translates to his appointed portion, his daily bread.
If we pull the camera back and look at global human thought, Agur has independently arrived at the exact same conclusion as the Buddhist concept of the middle way, or Aristotle's golden mean.
Yes. Across vastly different cultures and centuries, there is a universal recognition that extremes distort the human soul.
Extreme wealth breeds the distortion of arrogance. Extreme poverty breeds the distortion of desperation.
Agur is praying for the precise bandwidth of existence where his character, his empathy, and his connection to reality can remain fully intact.
And this grounded humility extends to how Agur views the natural world. He doesn't look at apex predators for inspiration.
In verses 24 through 28, he gives his students a lesson in ancient natural philosophy, observing 4 things that are tiny on the earth, but exceedingly wise.
The ants, the conies or hyraxes, the locusts, and the spider or lizard. Let's break down the mechanics of why these specific animals are highlighted.
It's a masterclass in biomimicry and organizational structure. First, the ants. He notes they are a people not strong, yet they prepare their meat in the summer.
Agur's observing what we now call swarm intelligence.
An individual ant is weak and practically blind. Yet, an ant colony can build complex, temperature-controlled subterranean cities and manage perfect logistical supply chains.
They teach us the power of compound effort and long-term foresight.
Next, the conies, which modern translations identify as rock badgers or hyraxes. A feeble folk, yet make they their houses in the rocks.
The hyrax has very few natural defenses. They aren't fast, they aren't venomous, they don't have large fangs.
So they survive through spatial awareness, they understand their exact physical limitations, and they leverage an environmental advantage, the impenetrable rock, for their security.
They teach us that wisdom is knowing what you cannot do and finding shelter in structures stronger than yourself.
Then we have the locusts, verse 27. The locusts have no king, yet go they forth all of them by bands.
This is a brilliant observation of decentralized leadership.
A locust swarm can consist of billions of insects, darkening the sky and stripping entire regions of vegetation. Yet, there is no CEO locust.
There is no central command structure issuing orders.
Biological science tells us that when solitary grasshoppers are forced into close proximity, serotonin triggers a physical and behavioral transformation into the swarming locust phase.
They move in perfect, coordinated ranks through local peer-to-peer interaction.
Agur is highlighting the terrifying power of a decentralized community acting with a singular, unified purpose.
And finally, the spider, or the gecko lizard. Verse 28. The spider taketh hold with her hands, and is in kings' palaces.
This represents infiltration through relentless persistence and adaptability.
The king can build a massive fortress with armed guards at the gates to keep out invading armies.
But the tiny gecko slips right through the cracks in the masonry, walks up the wall using the microscopic setae on its toes, and makes its home on the ceiling of the throne room.
It gains access to the highest echelons of power simply by utilizing its unique design and refusing to be stopped by conventional barriers.
Translating this to our modern culture is incredibly jarring. We have this absolute obsession with the lions of industry.
We idolize brute strength, the alpha personalities, the billionaires who roar, disrupt markets, and throw their weight around.
But Agur tells his students to look at the ants and the geckos.
Sustainable success very rarely looks like a roaring lion. It looks like small, consistent preparation over decades.
It looks like understanding your limitations and finding a solid rock. It looks like building decentralized, cooperative communities. It is unglamorous, but it is exceedingly wise.
Agur completely redefines the metrics of power and success.
Which gives you, the listener, a profound new framework. Sometime today, try meditating on Agur's golden prayer.
What would it look like to consciously reject the exhaustion of chasing the extremes? Can you find the courage to ask for the middle way, just enough to maintain your integrity?
And as you face your challenges, stop trying to be the alpha lion. Where can you apply the swarm intelligence of the ant or the quiet, persistent access of the gecko?
Those questions shift the foundation of how we operate, and it provides the perfect thematic launchpad for our final destination.
We've examined the king, the friend, the sluggard, and the sage. Now, Proverbs brings all of this macro wisdom and funnels it into the most fundamental micro-unit of society, the household economy and the individual operating at peak capacity.
We arrive at chapter 31.
This might be the most famous and simultaneously the most deeply misunderstood chapter in the entire corpus of ancient wisdom literature.
We are talking about King Lemuel's mother and the legendary virtuous woman.
To set the context, chapter 31 contains the words of King Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him. Like Agur, the exact historical identity of Lemuel is debated by scholars.
Some ancient traditions suggest it was a pet name for Solomon, meaning this is the advice of Bathsheba. Others believe Lemuel was a king from the neighboring nation of Massa.
Regardless of the specific historical identity, what we possess here is a rare, vital document. Maternal instruction shaping the moral compass of a male ruler.
And her instruction is intense. She doesn't coddle him.
She starts with stark warnings about the coping mechanisms of power, verses 4-9. She warns him against giving his strength to women, and specifically against the dangers of strong drink.
It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted.
We have to look at the psychology of power here. Kings or modern executives, politicians, high net worth individuals have the unlimited resources to indulge any appetite.
They can afford the most expensive wine, the constant stream of parties, the best distractions.
But leadership is inherently isolating and highly stressful. There's a massive temptation to use these resources as numbing agents to cope with the pressure.
But the mother warns that numbing the pain also numbs the conscience.
Exactly. Matthew Henry points out a vital distinction in the text. Verse 6 says to give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those that be of heavy hearts.
In the ancient world, before modern anesthetics or antidepressants, alcohol was used medicinally as a restorative agent or a palliative care mechanism for the dying.
It was a tool to ease terminal physical or emotional agony. But a leader, Lemuel's mother argues, does not have the luxury of checking out.
If a leader numbs himself, he forgets the law. His mind dulls and he perverts the judgment of the afflicted. He can no longer feel the pain of the people he is supposed to protect.
Because his ultimate mandate is explicitly laid out in verses 8 and 9. Open thy mouth for the dumb and the cause of all such as are appointed to destruction. Open thy mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy.
Her lesson is a devastating critique of self-indulgent leadership. She tells her son, your royal power, your wealth, your platform, they do not exist so you can throw better parties.
They exist so you can act as the voice for the voiceless. True power is meant to be spent on behalf of the powerless.
It is the ultimate moral test of any leader. And this leads directly into the second half of the chapter, starting at verse 10, which shifts from a mother's warning to a breathtaking poem about the virtuous woman.
Structurally, this is an acrostic poem in the original Hebrew. Each of the 22 verses begins with a successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet, from Aleph to Tav.
Why does that structural detail matter? Why not just write a regular list?
In ancient Near Eastern literature, an acrostic wasn't just a clever memorization trick. It conveyed a theological and philosophical concept of totality. From A to Z, it represents total structural perfection and conceptual completeness.
The author is saying, here is the complete, exhaustive picture of human excellence.
But we have to tackle a massive obstacle right here.
For generations of modern listeners, this complete picture of human excellence has felt like a suffocating straitjacket.
In many cultural and religious circles, the Proverbs 31 woman has been weaponized. It has been held up as an impossible checklist designed to make women feel perpetually inadequate.
She is often presented as the ultimate exhausted domestic servant. She gets up before dawn, she goes to bed after midnight, she cooks, she sews, she keeps a pristine house, her children are perfect, and she submits quietly.
It has induced enormous amounts of guilt and burnout.
And that interpretation is a catastrophic misreading of the original text. It shrinks a magnificent, roaring lioness of a poem down into a 1950s sitcom stereotype.
Let's look at the foundational Hebrew etymology. Verse 10 begins, "Who can find a virtuous woman?" The Hebrew word translated as virtuous or worthy is cheel.
Cheel. What does that actually mean in the broader context of the ancient language?
Cheel does not mean quiet, demure, or domesticated. It means strength, wealth, ability, efficiency, and valor.
This is the exact same word used elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible to describe an army's combat strength, or to describe David's mighty men in battle, the heroes of valor.
So the poem actually begins, "Who can find a woman of valor?"
Yes, she is a powerhouse. When you strip away the Victorian domestic assumptions and read the actual verbs describing her actions, you see a masterclass in economic and social dominance.
Look at verse 16. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she planteth the vineyard.
She is independently evaluating real estate, executing the purchase, and allocating capital to develop agricultural infrastructure. She is a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur.
Look at verse 24. She maketh fine linen, and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant.
The linen trade was a major economic driver in the Levant. She isn't just knitting sweaters for her kids. She is running a profitable manufacturing supply chain and negotiating with international merchants.
She is generating serious revenue, and what does she do with that revenue? Verse 20. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy.
She is a major philanthropist, using her economic leverage to stabilize her community.
And crucially, verse 26. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She is a recognized intellectual force. She is a counselor and a teacher.
So, translating this to the 21st century, this text is not a checklist designed to trap women in the kitchen. It is a profound, empowering allegory of wisdom incarnate, and it is a literal portrait of a fully realized human being operating at the absolute peak of their potential.
It balances the entire book. We started in chapter 25 with the king using his power to search out the truth.
We end in chapter 31 with a woman of valor using her intellect, her industry, and her economic power to actualize truth and justice in the marketplace.
And it all culminates in verse 30, which anchors the entire philosophy of Proverbs. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain. But a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised.
In a world both ancient and intensely modern that reduces human value to physical symmetry, youth, or superficial charisma, this text drives a stake into the ground.
It declares that aesthetic beauty is fleeting and manipulative charm is a lie. But valor, moral character, industriousness, and reverence for the divine, that is what is worthy of eternal praise in the city gates.
It reorients our entire value system. So as we close this deep dive, here is your final challenge. Look at the ultimate markers of this woman of valor. She executes her work with excellence, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and she stretches out her hands to the needy.
Regardless of your job title, or your bank balance, how are you using your specific talents and your economic leverage to uplift the people around you? Are you a force of valor in your community?
As we pull back and look at the vast journey we've taken from chapter 25 to chapter 31, it is breathtaking how comprehensive this blueprint is.
We started in the high courts of kings, dealing with absolute power, corruption, and the terrifying heat required to refine a toxic organization.
We moved into the intimate space of friendships, learning to distinguish the surgeon's scalpel from the enemy's kiss, and acknowledging the physical weight of the firebrands we throw online.
We confronted the comedy and the tragedy of our own inner sluggard, recognizing the phantom lions we invent to avoid the hard work of reality.
We stood with Agur, marveling at the swarm intelligence of ants and embracing the humility of the golden mean.
And we ended in the bustling marketplace, watching a woman of valor wield her economic power to build a just society.
The ultimate takeaway from this architecture is that true wisdom is not esoteric. It isn't locked away in a monastery, and it isn't just for monarchs sitting on thrones. Wisdom is deeply, unapologetically ordinary.
It is found in how you listen to critique. It is found in how you manage your inbox, how you verify the data before making a decision, and how you treat the vulnerable person standing right in front of you.
The human heart might be a murky, complicated landscape, prone to self-deceit and terrified of failure. But these ancient proverbs act as the ultimate diagnostic dye injected into our system.
They illuminate the blockages, they expose the brittle dross, and they show us the exact practical steps required to build a life of profound valor.
That's the heart of this section. This is Wisdom for the Present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.